to another interview episode of After the Abuse. Today we'll be interviewing Mark Godoy. Let's get right into that, shall we? Mark is joining us from the state of New York via Skype audio. Mark, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little about your life now.
My life now, I'm working in New York as a freelance motion designer and an illustrator, also an exhibiting fine artist.
Can you tell us a little about what you had to endure as a child?
I would say the lasting thing that still leaves an impression on me is the isolation, the shame, the guilt. I was abused by an older male cousin when I was 8 years old. I was a cousin I didn't really know. He came to live with my family. I have a really large family. It's my mother's sister lost her housing. We were living in Queens. She was living in Brooklyn. She moved in with us and brought her 3 children. My older male cousin, his younger brother, who's my age, and his younger sister. And he molested me and his brother. And that went on for several months until I kind of realized something was wrong. Didn't feel right. Initially, most times, you don't really know what's going on, depending on how young you are. I was 8. I look back now, trying to rationalize as I'm 34 now, as a man on what happened to me. I always, throughout my 20s, teens, told myself that I should have known better. And that's just the guilt. This is me not being able to process this in a healthy way. It's only been in the last 2 years I've been seeking therapy. So when I look back, I think those are the lasting effects of what happened to me. The abuse, I just dealt with a ton of shame, guilt. Definitely scarred me emotionally for a long time.
What was it that prompted you to start your healing journey?
A bunch of failed relationships. I think that usually kickstarts a lot of things as survivors. You just realize things that normal people have and you don't have, or dysfunction, the things that you do in your daily life. You kind of see where it's not working. And for me, I saw a bunch of failed relationships, intimate relationships. I was having a really difficult time opening myself up to my girlfriends, and I just didn't like that feeling. I knew I was running from something, and I knew it was rooted in my abuse. I just didn't know how to express it. That's what led me down this path.
Many abuse survivors have a distorted view of self-worth. What do you do to remind yourself that you have worth?
Sometimes I talk to myself. For a long time I thought I was crazy for doing it, but I would talk to myself. I would tell myself, you're talented, you're gifted, you're special, you're strong. What was done to you is not who you are. It doesn't really define who I am. But it took me a really long time. It really did. Like I said, it's only been 2 years since I've been in therapy. For the large majority of my life, I didn't tell anybody about what happened to me. Nobody knew. And I certainly didn't process it in any kind of healthy way. So for the longest time, I just told myself. I just want to reinforce positive images of myself or who I was. So I would just talk to myself. Sometimes I would write.
How do you counter depression at the times when things seem the most bleak?
This is difficult for me because I'm still trying to find healthy coping mechanisms. For the longest time, it was self-distraction. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, so I'm a huge gamer. To this day, I still play a ton of video games. It's kind of that feel-good thing for me where I don't have to think about anything. I could just play. I'm, with my friends, and, we just have fun. If I'm not drawing or painting, which was what was kind of the main thing that would distract me, when I'd feel a certain kind of way, I would lean more heavily on my creative side. I would be inspired through the pain. That's kind of what helped me express myself, and quite frankly, I think that's what saved me. Because there were times I was very depressed, but painting and kind of expressing myself in a creative way helped a lot. But yeah, and I played video games, and I was an athlete in college, so sports and exercise was a huge factor for me too. It definitely took my mind off of negative emotions and negative feelings. But the feelings are a little bit different now that I'm actually trying to process what happened to me in these last 2 years. I've lost those kind of coping mechanisms, so I'm still trying to figure out what are healthy ones for me. And I don't know if that's just an end result of the journey. As you start to heal and do different things, certain things don't work for you anymore. Working out and exercise used to be a major thing for me. It's only recently I'm kind of getting back into it, but for the last 2 years, I had no motivation to exercise or trying to release those, negative emotions. I tried to get back into painting, but sometimes when you're in a difficult mental state and they don't seem positive, it's hard for me to push through the creativity. It's kind of me just trying to figure it out at this point. I'm trying to pull a little bit from each of the things that used to work for me and see if I could just take them in smaller doses if it helps. It seems to be working okay, but not the way I want it to, but it's a journey, so I'm embracing it.
Many abuse survivors have to deal with substance abuse or addiction in one form or another. Is this something that you had to deal with?
I've never, no, not substance abuse, but I would say because of one of my my coping mechanisms was to play video games to self-distract, that sometimes it would become obsessive. Like when I know I have something in the back of my mind that's bothering me and I don't want to deal with it, sometimes I would play so much to the point that my eyes would be burning because I just don't want to think about anything. I could definitely put that in an addictive category where I would just play just because I don't want to cope with anything. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to think about it. And that was the only way I could not think about it at all. And as you may know, sometimes it's pervasive. It's hundreds of times a day things are flashing in my mind, and I think about something triggers me, and I'm trying to move on to something else. But sometimes it's all the time, to the point that I don't even sleep well at night. Most of the time I don't sleep well. Like even last night I didn't sleep well. Residual kind of thing from the abuse, it's associated with it. Most of my abuse happened at night, so I rarely sleep well at night.
So what would you say to someone who's just starting their healing journey?
Be patient with yourself. I'd say allow yourself to be in that moment, because it is extremely difficult. And that was something I wasn't necessarily prepared for when I started this process. When I first started, I did the Bristlecone interview. I thought I was prepared mentally, like, okay, I'm going to do this interview. I feel like I'm in a good place. I can talk about it. But I really wasn't prepared for that journey. It hospitalized me. I broke down mentally. I was in a severe depressive state. I wasn't eating, sleeping. I was really hard on myself during that time because I wanted to be further along, and I would compare myself to other survivors or other men who were in this journey, and I saw that they were doing well or seemingly doing well, and that I was very hard on myself. So I would tell a survivor who's starting this process to be easy on yourself, because it does take a ton of time. It does take a ton of self-reflection and introspection, and you need to look at yourself and kind of be in those moments and those feelings and allow it to happen. Because for so long we've been told we're not allowed to do this, we're not allowed to feel a certain way, we're not allowed to talk about it, we're not allowed to heal. That's something for women, that's something for other people. It's not really for us. Nobody wants to deal with our issues, nobody wants to talk about our issues. So we have that psychology already going on that defeats us in this process. So if we allow ourselves to just separate from that, just be okay with healing and feeling the pain and allowing it to happen, it'll make us, the journey a lot healthier and easier. But it's by no means easy.
What would you say as individuals or as a society we can do to protect children now?
Well, I'll speak to as an individual. I think as individuals, we need to own our own stories, our own narrative, the way we speak about abuse and what it means to us. So obviously as survivors, we have personal experience with it, so we can speak to it from that side. But as people who aren't survivors, that maybe they know somebody or maybe they don't know somebody, I think what they need is an open mind to what this process is like for survivors and what it's like for their families and their friends. If you don't come to it with a mindset of empathy and understanding, it defeats what we're trying to do, and it further puts us in a smaller box when we're trying to raise awareness and let people understand that this is something that happens to 1 in 6 men. That's over 20 million men in the U.S. alone. That's a lot of people. So it's not something that some leprechaun. It's not a fairy tale thing. It happens to a lot of people. So if we can at least open our minds and be empathetic to that process as individuals first, then I think as a society we can talk about it. It is an epidemic, and it is something that's happening, and it's causing a lot of trouble. People with substance abuse, people in and out of in the prison system, and a lot of these people are suffering from sexual abuse. It's something that we do need to talk about on an individual level, and I think then it would be something we could talk about as a society. And then too with parents, my parents are I'm a first generation American. My parents are not. They weren't born in this country. It's culturally something that you don't talk about. To come to a country like the United States, you think people are a little bit more open. They don't talk about it here either. That's something that I think a conversation needs to happen. What are healthy sexual relations? What's appropriate for children? What can they do and can't do, and empower kids to feel like they can have control over their body, over what people say or do to them. They don't have to be afraid to express that. That they don't feel right if something feels wrong. Something feels wrong, that they're okay in saying that, and just giving children that kind of liberty to take control of themselves.
Thank you for sharing with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you again, Mark, for sharing with us. Your healing journey is a reminder to us that there are always bumps on the road, but we can persevere. That's all for this week's episode. Have a good day, and take care of yourself. If you're looking for resources on helping yourself or someone else who has gone through abuse, you can visit rain.org. Or, for resources specifically for men, go to oneinsix.org. If you're struggling with thoughts of suicide, please call one of the numbers in your area on the screen.